So here's a quick summary for those of you out there that wasn't paying attention. Mass Effect Andromeda features a decent story with some decent characters. Mass Effect Andromeda features a decent story with some decent characters.
Mass Effect Andromeda features a decent story with some decent characters.
You serious?
What's going on, guys? Golden Reaper here, back at it again for another video after a massive hiatus. I was gonna do a video about why Mass Effect Andromeda is underrated, but as I kept playing the game and as just time progressed, I was like, wow, this game is actually not underrated. It's justifiably fucking trash. So yeah, I'm gonna be ripping apart this game essentially. I'm not gonna go too in depth because like I don't have a lot of time, but so yeah, without further ado, let's get right into it. So after the success of the original Mass Effect trilogy, EA and BioWare wanted a fresh start with the next installment in the series. They took the responsibility of the next game from BioWare's main studio in Edmonton and handed it off to a smaller studio in Montreal so that the Edmonton studio could focus on another game, which I'm assuming is Anthem, the game they announced last E3. The Montreal studio's only real experience working with Mass Effect was making the downloadable DLC Omega for Mass Effect 3. With Andromeda, their plan was kind of to focus on exploration, which the original trilogy failed to do after the first game, and they wanted to make like a No Man's Sky type game with BioWare graphics and story. Unfortunately, no one working on Andromeda had any idea how they were going to combine procedural generated worlds with a solid story. And this is including the issues of the studio being understaffed and just not having the resources to make the game that they were planning on making. With or without the procedurally generated worlds, the Montreal studio knew that they were going to run into issues while developing this game because of the Frostbite engine. EA has basically mandated that all their studios, like the studios that they own, are going to be using the Frostbite engine on their games, and while it's one of the most powerful engines out there, it's also one of the hardest to use. The main problem with the Frostbite engine is that it's developed for first-person shooters, like for Battlefield and Battlefront, not for third-person action RPGs. The engine simply just doesn't have the tools needed for Andromeda, and a person who worked on Andromeda said that the Frostbite is wonderful for rendering and lots of things, but one of the key things that makes it really difficult to use is anything related to animation, because outside of the box, it just doesn't have an animation system.
You're for real, huh? Are you for real?
The Montreal studio was also working a bit with the Edmonton studio who made the original trilogy, and because of this, infighting eventually ensued. While the Edmonton studio thought that the game wasn't where it needed to be during pre-production, the Montreal studio thought that the Edmonton studio was stealing ideas from them and essentially trying to sabotage them, although that kind of doesn't make any sense. But this caused dozens of people from the Montreal studio to end up leaving for other studios, and most of those positions weren't refilled. The animation studio was left understaffed. So keeping all these issues in mind while playing Mass Effect Andromeda, the game was clearly rushed. The writing is utter shit, the boss fights are lackluster as fuck, and I played Andromeda this past October after waiting months for the game to be patched, and I wasn't going to spend $60 on a broken mess because I had heard that it was broken upon release. And I beat the game in about a week. It's sort of like a 20-hour main story campaign, and the game's still broken as hell. Like, you consistently run into invisible walls, the game will essentially freeze constantly, like the frames are dropping to 0 for a moment. Sometimes it passes, other times it doesn't, and I have to reset the game. Every once in a while, enemies will fly up into the air, getting glitched in the ceiling, forcing me to restart from a past checkpoint because I'll be stuck in combat, unable to access terminals that I need to access to like progress in the game, and you have to be outside of combat to access these terminals. And the combat is pretty much the highlight of the game. It's fast, it's fun, but the lack of enemy variations means the game gets stale pretty quickly. You're just fighting essentially the same guys over and over again. I played the game on Insanity, and I think that if I had played on a lower difficulty, it would not have been nearly as fun.
We got company.
The main issue with the game is the writing. When I started the game, I was confused as fuck because the player character's father is wearing N7 armor, and I was under the assumption that the game takes place thousands of years in the future because of the ending of Mass Effect 3 with the destruction of the mass relays and all the destruction of the technology. I assumed that this was going to be a sequel to Mass Effect 1 through 3, so I didn't understand how, after all the technology was destroyed and kind of the way that they traveled between galaxies, it was gone. So how are we gonna do a game where they have like in the same universe where they have no way to kind of travel between galaxies? But it turns out that the Andromeda explorers left the Milky Way the same year that Mass Effect 2 takes place. So instead of getting a fresh start with Mass Effect Andromeda, the writers pretty much decided to handcuff themselves to the original trilogy. And another issue I had was the lack of new sentient races to be discovered in Andromeda. The original trilogy had the humans, the Asari, the Drell, the Elcor, the Hanar, the Keepers, the Turians, the Solarians, the Volus, the Batarians, the Krogan, the Collectors, the Geth, the Kori. Like, they had so many races, the Vorcha, the Vog, the Rachni, all inhabiting the Milky Way. And that's just the sentient races. That's not even including the races that you have to like fight, that they're not sentient, they're just like monsters pretty much. Andromeda brings back the humans, the Solarians, the Asari, and the Krogan, while only introducing the Jardan, who are pretty much extinct, the Remnant, who were created by the Jardan, and they're supposed to be sentient, but they're kind of not really, I guess. And I guess the Angara, who are pretty much the only real race left, but they were also created by the Jardan, and the Ket, who are pretty much the Angara just turned evil. So as you can see, like, the writers are just pumping creativity into this fucking game, right? Andromeda is like the 4th installment in the Mass Effect universe in a new console generation, and somehow the 4th game in the series not only looks worse visually than the previous games, but if Mass Effect 3 was remastered on PS4 and Xbox One, it would look leagues better than Andromeda. In terms of like the galaxy of Andromeda, it's smaller in scale than the Milky Way in the original trilogy. The cities aren't as visually interesting as many of the other cities in the original trilogy. And sure, Andromeda has like the open world aspects, but the open worlds are empty as fuck, and aesthetically they're super simple and boring. Of the 5 open world areas, 2 of them are fucking deserts with some mountainy areas. And the Nexus, which is pretty much like the base of operations for the Andromeda settlers, is not nearly as dense with things to do and see when compared to like the Citadel in the original trilogy. The Nexus is pretty much like a cheap knockoff of the Citadel, both inside and out. The Ket are the main guys you're going to be shooting throughout the 20-hour story, and there's 4 types. There's the Fodder Ket, the Tank Ket, the Invisible Ket, and the Ket Dogs. And then there's the Ket Bosses. The first time you see a Ket boss, it's like, oh sick, this game actually has bosses, because I didn't know the game had bosses in it. And the story hypes these guys up like they're the fucking Akatsuki from Naruto, and their leader, the Archon, is hyped up like he's fucking Madara.
Anime for virgins.
And he gets a ton of cutscenes with him turning around with the camera closing in on him, trying to make him look like as menacing as possible. They even hype up his assistant, like the Cardinal. But these guys are literally the exact same thing with different color clothes on. They fight the same, they look the same, they sound the same, and their motivations are essentially the same. In combat, they have little circle like robots that go around them and need to shoot these things to take their shields down. And once their shield's down, you can like pump shots into them until they lose about 1/3 of their health, and then it's rinse and repeat from there. The shield goes up, the robot comes back, you gotta shoot. You know, it's the same thing over and over again. And the first time you're like, oh cool, like this game has bosses. And then the second time you're like, oh okay, this is like the same as the last boss. And after that, it's just a fucking chore to kill these guys. It's no longer fun. The Archon is the leader and the final boss, and at one point in the story, they hint that he's not actually the guy in charge, and it turns out, of course, that he's not the actual final bad guy, because they need to set up a sequel, like there's ever going to be a fucking sequel to Andromeda after the failure of this trash-ass game. But after you beat him, like, you've beaten 10 other guys just like him a couple hours prior, so it's nothing special. The end credits roll, and right after that, we see what looks like the Archon's boss looking out into space, and he turns around and walks toward the camera, and everything fades to black. This guy is literally the same as the other Ket bosses, but he's wearing fucking purple. I'm so hyped for Mass Effect Andromeda 2, bro. Like, oh my god. But like, the story relies heavily, like stories like this rely heavily on a good antagonist. They have to have interesting motivations and aspects to them that make them somewhat relatable, like two opposing ideals, the main character versus the fucking bad guy who has opposing ideals. And that's what's supposed to make this shit interesting. But of course, Andromeda, as rushed as it is, has a typical generic fucking cookie cutter villain. Like this Archon guy. His most profound, like, go up on the Mass Effect wiki and look up the Archon. His most profound quote is, "Make no mistake, this is a one-way trip." You gotta be fucking kidding me with that shit, man. This guy's motivation is pretty much to turn a bunch of inhabitable planets, the few inhabitable planets in the Andromeda system, into dust, and then turn everyone into cat. Destruction for the sake of destruction. So let's compare this to Mass Effect 1's villain, a Turian named Soren Arterius.
Saren. Nihilus. This isn't your mission, Saren. What are you doing here?
The Council thought you could use some help on this one.
I wasn't expecting to find the Geth here. The situation's bad.
Don't worry. I've got it under control.
And this guy was he was a Spectre, the Spectres are essentially an elite group of, the most elite group of soldiers, and they take orders from the Citadel Council. But this guy was intelligent, cunning, capable, and he had a reputation for ruthlessness. And instead of being racist, black people hating white people or white people hating black people, he was a speciesist, I guess, if that's a word. So he had a dislike for other species, and he kind of developed this after his brother was killed in a war. And we learn a lot about this guy through David Anderson in the first game, who's the mentor to the main character in the first game. And yeah, this guy just has a long history of acts behind him that you learn about as the story progresses, that kind of built up his character. And he's interesting. He's relatable. Racism is not relatable to me, but it's understandable. It's a real thing in the real world. People are racist. So he had this relatable aspect to him, whereas the Archon is not relatable at all. What fucking person would be yo, my goal in life, bro, is to fucking turn all these planets into dust, bro. Yeah, that's what I want to do with my life. Come on, man. It's not I can't get behind that. It's not interesting. I've seen that villain 100 million times in every show I've fucking watched, every book I fucking read. People the villain just wanting to destroy shit, just to destroy shit. It's not interesting. It's not compelling. It's not good writing.
Who are you?
They've lost navigation.
We're being steered into their ship.
Just tell me what you want.
I won't explain what you can't understand.
Ryder, I have almost regained control of the ship. I need a few more seconds.
Shut the fuck up! Know your fucking place, trash!
So yeah, that's Mass Effect Andromeda. The characters in Andromeda are just not very interesting. They're not written well, and no matter how much BioWare tries to fix this game, or tried, because they've completely given up on the game, they're not gonna patch it anymore or anything. No DLC, nothing. But no matter how much they tried to fix the game, they were fighting a losing battle, because there's not a patch that you can put out that's really gonna fix the shit writing and the shit characters. Cora is a knockoff of Miranda, Drac is a knockoff of Rex, and everyone else is essentially completely forgettable. The side quests are absolutely atrocious, and unfortunately for me, I beat The Witcher 3 this year, in 2017, early 2017, but 2017 nonetheless, so I'm still spoiled from that game's amazing side quests. Andromeda side quests are pretty much just filler. They aren't even worth completing unless you want to get the trophies or achievements, and the main story was just shit, and it's honestly not even worth buying the game for. It's just not interesting. And don't even get me started on the RPG elements, or should I say the lack of RPG elements in Andromeda. I thought Fallout 4 was real bad in this department, but Andromeda's just as bad, if not worse. And Fallout 4 for me was the most disappointing game of this console generation, and that's followed by Arkham Knight, which was the second most disappointing. But now Mass Effect Andromeda is the most disappointing game I've played this generation. And it's real disappointing, because it's a series that I've been playing since I was in early high school, freshman, sophomore. I really loved Mass Effect Andromeda, or not Mass Effect. I really loved Mass Effect 1 through 3, and I thought, even though the ending was kind of meh, I thought overall the series was real solid, well written. The characters were awesome, but it's just insane how it can go from being honestly one of the best trilogies in gaming history to being just a joke. Mass Effect Andromeda is a meme. It made Mass Effect a meme. When people think of Mass Effect now, they don't think of Mass Effect 1 through 3 for the most part. Mainly people are thinking about Andromeda, and really the animations really put Andromeda to like meme status. So nobody really takes the series seriously anymore. So I think it's smart for EA to like take a break from Mass Effect, let like the meme die essentially before putting out another installment. And I think it's a good idea, because if we're gonna put out another Mass Effect game within the next like 3 years, it just wasn't gonna sell, honestly. Like people were gonna think of it like same thing with Battlefield 4. Like Battlefield 4 launched broken, and DICE and EA had to put a lot of work into like marketing and stuff to fix the mistake, like to fix the perception that they had created on their game. So I mean, they were able to do it, but it took a lot of work. They had to like capitalize on what people have been asking for, which was the World War I era, and that was like their chance to really get Battlefield back from like the meme status that it had acquired. But they were able to do that, and I don't see them being able to do the same thing with Mass Effect Andromeda, or the Mass Effect series in general, just because Mass Effect is not a multiplayer shooter. It's a single player game, and single player games have a much smaller like market, because multiplayer games are a lot more popular. You can play with your friends and shit. So for them to get Mass Effect back to what it was going to take a lot of work, and I don't think that they're really wanting to put that much work into Mass Effect. I think they're kind of done with Mass Effect, honestly, and it's sad. It's disappointing, because like I said, it's one of my favorite. It is my favorite game trilogy of all time. Mass Effect 2 is my favorite game of all time. So it's super disappointing. I wish they put 5 years into the game. I wish they had put longer into the game, to be honest. Like, I know they couldn't have, because like I said before earlier in the video, like it was costing them a lot of money to make the game. But honestly, I wish they had either put more time into the game and made it better. But from what they had, I don't really see them improving it that much. But I either wish they had put more time into the game to fix it as much as possible, to make it as good as they could, or just not releasing the game at all, because like I said, it put Mass Effect into meme status, and this game sullies the original trilogy. Like it kind of just shits on the series in general. And it's understandably they want to move on to new IPs and shit. And yeah, like I get that. The reason I think Mass Effect Andromeda failed was because, like I said before, they essentially got a whole new team to work on this Mass Effect game. They didn't have the same people that worked on the original trilogy. So, and like the people that worked on the original trilogy had moved on to new IPs. So I think EA and BioWare as a whole are going to just move on and work on new IPs. And whether those IPs are good or not is still up in the air, but at least they're not going to be, fucking sloppily throwing together another Mass Effect game to sully the series even more. But yeah, that's all I got for today. I could go on about Mass Effect for a long time. Like I said, I love the series, but yeah, I'm not going to. So dislike, comment, subscribe. Next video coming out is Battlefield 1 is absolute trash, so stay tuned for that. And yeah, I'll catch you guys later.